Jamie, welcome to Legends of Land. Jamie from the Land Investing Club. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just hop right into your niche. Tell me a little bit about how you approach the land business.
I think there's a lot of different niches within the niche, and mine's evolved, especially over the last 6 to 12 months. When I first got started, it was a lot of seller finance notes. So basically, go in, buy land as cheap as possible, generally 25 to 50% market value. And then I would go resell the property on my own for sale by owner and by posting it at different places around the internet. And then I was trying to get finance notes. So basically, you can think about it. I was the bank, and people would come to me for my land, and I would sell mortgages essentially on the properties. My reasoning for that was when I first got started, it was to ultimately replace my job, which I've been able to do. So now that I have a bunch of notes, it's still a significant part of my business, but my focus really now is on doing more flips, more cash deals, and looking for, I guess, more home runs versus the getting paid a few $100 a month for X amount of months. So it's been a transition for me over the past couple months in a kind of my business model, I'd say. But I still do quite a lot of owner financing because I still have a bunch of inventory. I think there's different types of properties that attract different types of sellers. So I'm always open to doing seller financing, but right now I'd say it's been a lot more. I focus in on a lot like nicer areas, so I'm very targeted on where I'm going, and so I've done a lot of investing right now in North Carolina where I live, and there's a lot of golf courses around here, so I'll target the golf courses, you can say, and then I get properties and I turn around some to builders or homeowners or whomever. So it's a little bit different of a business model than I've done over the past, which is more like go buy rural properties. I'm selling to generally a lower socioeconomic end buyer who maybe can't pay $10,000 but can pay me a few $100s down, then a few $100s a month for 4 years or something like that.
So, how do you think about the shift in your business? What were your goals that you were trying to get to that made you change your system?
Yeah, I guess number one, to get rich, just tongue in cheek. But so my goals just changed once I was able to quit my job and kind of stabilize financially with my notes. I don't know. It's funny. I believe in like manifesting stuff. And when I quit my job, I got an opportunity. A guy reached out to me he had like 300 properties in Colorado, like cheap rural lots. I ended up buying 50 from him. So I already had a
Wow.
big notes portfolio. And so I was able to sell off those properties. I ended up buying some more from him. He actually reached out to me like yesterday. So potentially buy some more from him. So I love the notes because it's a way for me to budget month to month of like, okay, this is what I'm expecting. I know I can pay my bills. I know I can buy food. So it's been a really effective way for me to transition from being an employee to being an entrepreneur, feeling
Mhm.
comfortable doing that, where I'm not eating ramen for lunch. And so now that I've stabilized financially, it's been a lot more of, okay, how do I really scale this and grow it and go after bigger deals? I know a lot of people still do. Maybe let's say, for example, you're buying at 25,000 and you're selling for 50. There's still a buyer pool who would be willing to do owner financing, but it just happens to be, I think, more when you get to 50,000 plus. In my experience, you're starting to find a buyer who's more of a cash buyer, and definitely if you're targeting like developers or home builders, they tend to be cash buyers always. So the reason I've transitioned to that is just bigger margins, maybe smaller ROI, but it's really impressive when I can go to my capital partner and say, yeah, I got so and so a 100% return on their money or whatever versus a 30% return, but that 30% could be 20,000 versus 5,000 when you're investing
Mhm.
2,500. So the kind of transition is I'm just trying to think of ways to I have the note side of the business. So you can think of that as one pillar of the stool. And now the next pillar is, okay, let's build up the cash side, get more inventory on that side where I'm doing cash flips that can really be huge cash injections into the business, which allows me to go find more deals, which allows the business to grow faster and I think bigger over time. And
Mhm.
I think ultimately too, beyond the numbers, I just got a little bored of the smaller rural deals. Don't enjoy working with that crowd as much. There's great people I've sold to and bought from, but there's just more headaches when it comes to notes. People default. It's more time intensive. I haven't really been able to outsource that part of the business as far as dealing with the notes, the note holders or the note buyers. But yeah, that's been really the transition is to just start growing faster financially. And that to me made the most sense with moving that direction. And there's a lot of different directions you go, but that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I like how you transitioned out of you didn't quit your day job, or you replaced your day job to make sure that you had that steady stream. What do you think if you were going to do it again? You know what you know now, and you were looking to, let's say, scale up as quickly as possible. Would you still start with notes to give yourself that stability, or do you see a path now that you've been through it to leapfrog some of that time?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I still would do notes. I think the biggest thing is I would have gone bigger faster. Once I understood the business model, which the business model's nutshell is to find deals, right? To find properties that you can buy at wholesale values and then resell them at basically retail. I'd say below a little bit below retail. You want to be competitive so you can get quicker deals, in my opinion, quicker flips. Excuse me. Because when I first started in real estate and like my entrepreneurial journey, I was trying to wholesale. I was trying to do flip houses, and I was really unsuccessful in that for whatever reason. But then once I found land, it was I was doing the exact same skill set of finding opportunities, but I was actually able to find deals. And so to answer your question, I think the biggest thing I really would have changed would have been to go bigger, faster, and to be more consistent. When I first started, I still had a lot of fear of like, why would people buy land? I've
Mm.
never heard about this. I don't see people on TV flipping land, moving dirt. It didn't make sense to me. And it took me a while to feel really confident in this business model, despite continuing to have success. I almost didn't believe it.
Yeah, interesting. So you when you say you would go bigger sooner, what's that actually look like tactically?
Yeah. So I mean, part of it's just strategies I've learned over time. So, like the guy I mentioned who had 300 properties, he's actually the second guy I've bought from who's owned 300 plus properties. So I think for me, like going bigger faster would have been something like identifying people like that who own a lot of properties who might be willing to sell. Number one. Number two would have been doing what I do now, which is like finding nice neighborhoods to go after and being very specific. Because I think when a lot of people get into land, in my opinion, they start at a county level or a state level, and they're just blasting the whole county, the whole state, looking for cheap lots. And I think that's great to get started. But I'm much more targeted now in what I'm doing. I focus in on very small neighborhoods, so it makes building a list a lot more tedious, a lot more time involved in building that list and getting mail out the door. I mostly send direct mail to find deals. But so I think to answer your question, like really specifically, I would have really just been way more specific about targeting high net worth areas and not being so concerned about the amount of capital I have in my bank account and be more concerned about, okay, where can I go find deals? Because if I find a good deal, then it's going to work itself out.
And the capital's generally available through some sort of partner.
You can find a capital partner and or you can wholesale it.
Mhm, mhm. What do you prefer out of the 2? What do you do most often?
So most often I've done capital partnerships. After I did my first like I think 4 or 5 deals, one of my good friends from college who's really successful was talking to me and he's like, "Dude, can I give you $10,000 and do this with you?" Because that's what I started with was $10,000. And I was like, "Hell yeah." Like I'm literally my first $10,000 I bought 6 deals.
Oh, wow.
So I was in a really cheap area in California, actually in Kern County near Rosamond. And so I bought 6 deals and then I'm out of cash. I had 2 flips and the other 4 were finance deals, which is pretty typical to my numbers anyways. But I'm waiting for these finance deals to build up my cash reserves again so I can go buy more properties. So once one of my friends did it, I had a few friends, it had a little waterfall effect where I had a few more friends come in. So I was able to go buy more deals. But so most of my deals to date have been capital partners. I just literally did a wholesale deal that closed on Monday. And that was super nice. I'm $0 in, and it wasn't a huge deal. I just made a quick $5,000, but it was 2 weeks. It took me 2 weeks from getting under contract to getting the $5,000. So that was like, it's like, man, I want to do more of those deals. I want to do bigger numbers, but so I think it's going to really depend on the person selling the property to me, on the strategy I use going forward. But I have a pretty big kind of, I call it like investor list now that's grown over the past couple of years. And I've been more aware of how I spend my time to try to find investors. And it's been really fun to grow with some of my friends and my family to help. I think that's like the coolest part. But I think what is easier and is to do wholesale deals. I think you don't have to deal with other people. You don't have to worry about paying other people out. You don't have to worry about explaining taxes to other people. It's just all, you can, I think, have less cooks in the kitchen. It just makes it easier over time.
Mhm. What do you think of working with capital partners or kind of one-stop shops? A lot of the coaching programs out there have a capital partner who will make a split with you and just they're a sophisticated investor as opposed to pulling friends and family.
So thus far, I've never worked with another land investor as a capital partner.
Hmm.
For example, I don't know if you've heard of Travis King.
Hmm.
So he's got, I think it's Land Capital, where they do that. They'll come in and fund your deal, and you get a split. And I have a lot of respect for Travis King. I've done his courses and stuff. But it just grew. Like I said, after my first friend asked me, I just started talking about it a lot more. And especially when you're not in real estate, but even in real estate, you don't meet a lot of land investors when you're out and about. I've gone to real
Hmm.
estate conferences, and everyone's like, wait, you do what? So it's a unique conversation starter. And so just through that, and honestly through LinkedIn and stuff, I've just been able to find new investors whenever I really needed them. I can't really speak to what it's like working with like a sophisticated investor like that, but I do see a lot of value. So like there's a couple properties I'm looking at right now that are much higher value, let's say like 100,000 plus. And those, just because I have less experience in those type of numbers, I'm following a process that I'm very confident about. But if I do end up needing capital, that might be where I bring in a sophisticated land investing capital partner. I think one, just to get a second set of eyes on it and just to feel more confident about it. And obviously, if they're coming in and putting in 100,000, even if I'm and we sell it for 200, let's say, and I'm only making 20,000 on that, so they're taking a lot more risk than I am, and I can see how it all plays out. I can be like, okay, this took me 6 months to sell. So if I found 10 of these, and then I can start, I think, making estimates and being like, okay, this is what it's going to look like in 6 to 12 months if these are the deals I go after, when I can buy one by myself, etc.
Yeah, I talk with a lot of land investors and I like the idea of using capital always becomes the bottleneck at some point. And I really like the idea of using capital that also has some knowledge of the next level, maybe that you're trying to get to. So
Definitely.
when people are doing just infill lots, okay, maybe take a little bit of capital and do a $50,000 residential, or excuse me, rural residential, and work with a capital partner who knows that market, and then you can, like you were saying, you start playing around in that area, and then maybe you're trying to do value add subdivides at some point further down, and now you're looking at a capital partner. Maybe they're going to bring a couple $100,000 to the table, but they're going to have all that knowledge too.
Yeah,
I like
100%.
that as a way. Yeah. Hmm.
And I think too, like when you, and it's, I think if you're early in the land investing career or seasoned or whatever, it's so easy to find those people. If you
Hmm.
just go on Facebook or wherever, you're always going to be able to find someone who knows a little bit more than you. And for the most part, people are willing to help. And a lot of it's because they're wanting to make money too. So as long as you can build a level of trust with that person, I think it's totally worth it. I wouldn't pass up on a deal because you don't have the capital. And if you can bring in someone who's a little bit wiser, and then you start hearing the questions they're asking, it's like maybe those are how I should be thinking about the deal. Like, not only is it flat, is it buildable, is it these like surface level due diligence checkpoints? It's like, okay, what is what are the subdividing rules here? Would it
Mhm.
make sense? So I think it makes a lot of sense to try to work with those people as much as possible, especially early on. And I'm in my early 30s, and I can see myself doing this for the next 50 years. So if I can spend the next 7 years working with really smart land investors, that's only going to make me better 40 on.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned your investor list. Tell me a little bit about your investor list, your strategy of building that. And it sounds like that's for possible capital partners.
Yes.
Okay.
So my investor list, it's really just been all, I mean, not all, but mostly organic. It's been a lot of, it started out as friends, then some family. And then when I quit my job, I started posting on LinkedIn just about what I'm doing. And then all of a sudden, I just started people reach out to me like, hey, this is really interesting. Can I learn more about it? So then I would set up calls, like Zoom type calls, and I would just talk to people about my business, about what I was doing, show them examples. And so my list just started growing. So now what happens when I find a deal is I make a video. It's normally about 5 minutes. I explain the investment. I go over the property, I go over comps, etc. And then I blast it out to my email list. And it's basically first come, first serve. So it's really made me start thinking a lot more about like creating a fund model, which I think better serve all of my like investor list versus just the one or two who get on the deal. But yeah, so it's really just been word of mouth. And then like I said, when I quit my job, it was just like I went to a real estate radio guys conference. It was a syndication seminar. Like it's called Secrets of Successful Syndication. And one thing they talked a lot about was building your brand. So what you do with your podcast, I'd say.
Mhm.
So to me, when I started thinking about how do I find more investors, which was like the reason I went to that conference in general, that was really one of the biggest points that stuck with me. So as soon as I was able to quit my job and actually start being very open about what I was doing to like the online world, that was like, okay, I got to be really intentional about this, about how am I going to attract my avatar, as people like to say. And so I've been experimenting a lot with that and just trying to figure out, okay, what draws people to me. Um, and I think a lot of people right now, it's a really interesting time because, you know, we have a lot of crazy market news and are we going to a recession? Are we not going to a recession? And we saw big drops from like the COVID highs in the stock market and stuff. But yeah, I was still posting, hey, look, I'm still making money even though the stock market's going down. So that was really, I think, right place, right time when I started posting a lot on LinkedIn, which really helped start growing my list.
Interesting that you're using LinkedIn. I'm not active on LinkedIn, so I haven't seen how many land investors are there. A lot of my
I haven't seen any.
act. Oh, okay, cool. I'm active on Twitter, is where I'm generally active,
Yeah,
and there's
I'm new
you're
to the
talking.
X world. So
Yeah, there's good stuff on there. People have really quality, concise information. Yeah, I love X as far as.
I've started learning a lot. I mean, it's obviously how you and I connected. But yeah, I've learned like the power of getting on X, and not even so much about posting like that. I'm still figuring it out, but just like connecting with people like you and finding their land investors and just real estate people and entrepreneurs. It, it's definitely a good way to build a network.
Mhm, mhm. Tell me a little bit about your team as far as how you run these operations, because you got a lot going on. You're doing land deals. You're also finding investors. What's that look like?
Yeah, so this is probably my biggest area of growth that I could be working on. I've had a couple of transaction coordinators on and off, and it's been hard for me to find a good one. I had a really good one. He was just a college kid, and then he went and studied abroad. So I've been waiting to find another one like him, or waiting for him to come back,
Mhm.
which really is my goal. And that's a big area that I'm trying to figure out is the transaction coordinator side and finding someone who really works with my like flow. And for some reason, I don't love the idea of having that one be like an abroad VA.
Mhm.
I like having someone who's fluent in English and can talk to people and who's also interested in real estate and potentially growing with me. That's
Mhm.
kinda how I structured his pay. But then I have a bunch of VAs who do a lot of my marketing and a lot of the paperwork stuff. And I try to use as much like software as I can as far as like CRMs and things like that, just to free up my time. And then the other one of the biggest parts of my team who I don't hear really anybody talking about is I have a business coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has been like influential in my like growth, just to help me move past like doubts, fears, anxieties, you can say, to coming up with like business strategies and just really helping keep me accountable. Because I think one of the biggest things I've seen from like the average to lower tier land investors to the ones who like, man, I want to be that guy. They're so consistent. They're consistently finding deals, they're consistently sending mail, and excuse me, and I just think like when you have someone who can help keep you accountable as an entrepreneur, like there's no one else there besides you. If you're not doing the work, no one's doing the work. So that's been really huge for me and like my growth. The areas that I want to outsource the most, like I said, is that transaction coordinator, because that frees up a lot of my time. And then I've started using tools like Taplio, which is like one that will help schedule posts for you and do things like that. I know some people hire like social media managers, but I think there's other ways to do it. So just trying to figure out tools and tricks to free up the time as much as possible. Even like a chat GPT to help come up with ideas, even though it's not someone on my team, but it's definitely freed up time for me.
Absolutely. What do you use? What tools do you use specifically in your land business, like CRM and any like company wiki, or what type of tools have helped you a lot?
Yeah, to find just to download data, I use Priced, PRYCD. I used to
Hmm.
use Data Tree all the time. I've never really messed with PropStream, but I hear good things. And then for like quick research, like all right, callers calling in, I need to pull up the property or whatever. I use RE Grid. Um, I think it's $100
Hmm.
per year, and it's a great little tool. You just punch in like the APN or the address, and it takes you right to the property. You can see who the property owner is, and you can see just by scrolling over the properties, you can see who owns the neighboring properties, which is really nice because that can really help develop your strategy of okay, maybe I'll wholesale this one. For example, today I got a deal under contract, and the owner on both the north and south lot next to mine was a home builder. So I got under contract, and I immediately found the home builder's information, and now I'm already texting with them. So that could end up being a really great deal. So that I really like about RE Grid. And then so those are like my two most useful tools. I use Google Earth and stuff like that to do due diligence. And then I use Rocket Print and Mail for mail services. Other tools I use, Follow Up Boss. That's like my
Okay.
CRM for all my leads. And then I still have an Excel sheet with all my properties on it. That has been an area where I'm like, probably time to update that. But I just have such a system with it that
Yeah.
I just know how it flows. I know how to find properties, and yeah, and that's just I've always been good with Excel, so it just becomes natural to me at this point.
Hmm. Yeah, it's hard to think about. I just did like a full refurbishing of all my systems and combined Calendly, Podio, Asana for client management all into Go High Level, which has all of the tools in one place, but it's been an absolute nightmare. I'm going to spend the next probably month getting all the integrations back. So I feel you. It's like you start out, piece together all of these software tools, and then it's hard to transition to something else when you get to a scale where you need to.
100%. And then it just takes time.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, this is going to pay off over the next 11 months, but that first month, man, that's going to
Mhm.
suck.
Yeah, for sure. It's that whole decision making matrix and being able to focus on the not urgent but important things. And that's the struggle every entrepreneur has, is like, how do you very dedicated and intentionally make time to things that are very important but have no urgency to them? And
Definitely.
yeah, that's a constant battle. What's your sales cadence look like? So a lead comes back, you mail out, the lead comes back. What's it look like in a quick good deal? What's the process look like?
Yeah, so great question. So lead comes in, phone call, text, email, whatever goes to my landing page, whatever it happens to be. And from there, my goal is to always get back to them within 48 to 72 hours.
Mm,
I used to try to do 24, and then I was like, this is impossible, especially when I have a lot of leads coming in. And that's where that transaction coordinator can be really useful. So basically, it's high level due diligence of, okay, is the property like, what's topography? Is it flood zone? Who are the owners? Are there any liens on the property? Property taxes paid? And did they accept my offer or not? Any notes from the seller, essentially. So that way, when I get back to the seller, and sometimes it's not always perfect like that. A lot of I'd say probably 40% of the time, it's just seller calls, and especially now that I'm still finding a transaction coordinator, so I'm the one answering that phone call. So while I'm on the phone with them, I'm at least I can high level do some due diligence, but typically, so ideally, that's what it looks like.
mhm.
I go through that system. I get back to them. I send a lot, mostly blind offers. And especially once I've hit an area once, I'm like, okay, I know I like this area. I know basically the range I want. Then I can go in and do like my second mailer in that area and be like, so that way I know when someone's calling in, it's okay, good deal.
Mhm.
But if it's a first mailer and someone's calling in, it's a lot of, hey, Brandon, oh, which property do you own? Awesome. So what makes you want to sell? And I'm just trying to learn their story. It's and trying to learn why they're trying to sell, trying to like just get to know them as much as I can in a 5-minute call. So that way, when I could get back to them, because I always tell them like, "Hey, Brandon, thanks for giving me all that information. By the way, do you own any other properties you're looking to sell?" That's always a great question to ask. And it's like, hey, give me 72 hours. I'll get back to you. My process, I tell them kind of my process. I want to do some due diligence, make sure we didn't miss anything over the computer when we first looked at your property. We're going to talk to our realtor in the area, which I like to talk to one or two realtors to get an opinion, especially if it's a new area. And then I'll get back to you in 72 hours. And then I'll get back to them. We come to an agreement. I send them a DocuSign contract and then send it over to my closing attorney.
Okay. Yeah, that's simple. And so it sounds like what I've heard with the successful cadence is similar to what you said there. That initial call is building some rapport and then doing whatever extra due diligence you can do over the phone, getting back to them with an offer and closing the deal. How often would you say that cadence happens versus how often is it you just have followed up via email for 6 months and someone just out of the blues, oh, yeah, I'm ready.
I would say so if 100% is all deals closed, I would say probably 70% is those people who call, email, text in, and
Hmm.
then who we close with like within that week. I'd
Yeah.
say you at least get it under contract. And that other 30%, probably 20% of that is okay, it's taken some time. I have to renegotiate. I made a bad offer initially. So we're working on that. Or maybe it's a follow up, just like, hey, just checking in. Like today, for example, I texted a woman who my offer was a little bit too high for me. And I was like, hey, if we get this down to 16,000, like we're good. I texted her today. She's like, you know what? We are interested, whatever. So that's probably like 20%, which like I'll call it like a 3-week plus follow up text, email, whatever. And then the last 10%, I would put in the bucket of, hey, are you still interested in selling? You sent me this letter 6 months ago or whatever. And it might be less than 10%, but that's what it feels like.
Okay. And do you do a portion of your negotiations via text, or is that generally saved for a phone conversation, or what's that usually look like where you have the best success?
I think it depends on how the seller chooses to communicate with me, is how I choose to
Mhm.
communicate with them. I think the best negotiating is over the phone. And then, but a lot of people text nowadays. So I would say most of my deals, it's over the phone. I probably, again, the 70-75% range. A lot of follow-up I do is via text. If I have a cell phone, I find that people are, to me at least, I feel like respond more to a text. And generally, we've texted once or twice already. So I think when they open up that text, they see the blue or whatever. So they're like, oh, yeah, I've talked to this guy before, which builds a little level of comfort. But yeah, most of my negotiating is via phone.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like there's
We're on the phone too. Not everybody
yeah,
is.
yeah, there's a lot of people who are on I mean, a lot of land owners have held the property for a long time, and they're old school, they're used to having, whereas probably newer landowners or younger landowners are probably more into the texting angle. So I think there's almost like two different types of people, like you were saying. So you just bounce around to what they're interested in.
Definitely. I think
Um,
to that point, 'cause I think most of the landowners I see or I buy from are 65 plus, let's call it. Yeah, and I think for those folks, it's a lot more phone
mhm.
call or email, but mostly phone call. And then it's the ones who like, yeah, my parents own this property, I inherited it. Like those, I think that's probably more the demographic that will respond more to my text messages.
Yeah, yeah. And from their point of view, that the ease of texting back and forth, they send a few texts back and forth, sign a piece of paper with you, and then they get 20 grand in their bank account. That's a nice seamless way for them to cash out their property. So
For
I
sure.
see I see why that's so appealing to people. That being said, what do you think the main reason for selling is? There's that one we just talked about where I inherited it, I'm not going to do anything with it. What are other big reasons, or what's the most common thing you see?
The lowest hanging fruit by far, at least from my experience, is I've owned the property for 10, 20 plus years. I wanted to build a house out there one day. We never got around to it, or my husband bought this property and he passed away, or we're old and we moved to Florida, like we're not coming back there, or it tends to be we've owned it for so long, we've been paying tax on it forever, and it's just like, sure, we'll take your cash.
Mhm.
This is almost like we forgot we had it type thing.
Mhm.
Straight we had it, except for that once or twice a year when we have to go pay taxes on it or pay your HOAs or whatever it is on it. So that's definitely, I mean, by far the biggest pool of sellers.
Which makes a lot of sense too because of the built-in equity that they have, whereas someone's only owned it for 5 years and you're trying to give them 50% of the value, they're probably taking a hit on that purchase price, whereas someone's had it for 30 years, they're still coming out far ahead and they can just get it off their plate.
Definitely. I mean, there is that percentage, right? Like I was talking to a woman the other day and she owns a property with her ex-husband still. And obviously we're not building on this anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
But they're still looking to get closer to what they paid for it. So I can see that being a potential deal, but like right now it's not. But yeah, so when I like do when my first go through of an area, and this might be unique, but I typically will only target people who've owned a property for 10 plus years. If I get a deal in that area, then I go back and I just pepper the whole area.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. What type of volume are you doing as far as sending out mailers? What's that first?
Like as far as like units of mail,
Yeah.
I try to do at least 5,000 a month.
Okay.
So
Yeah, you're doing.
not as big as some of the big guys, but that's what I've been comfortable with.
Mhm. Mhm. And you're looking to grow even bigger, you're bringing in some investors, maybe doing some syndication or something like that. W- Are you will that 5,000 mailers bring the volume for you to grow where you're looking to grow, or what what are you going to have to change your outreach methods at some point to scale, or will you
Definitely.
be able to do it? Okay. And
I th-
what's your thoughts on that?
I think with talking to some of the guys who I would say are like my North Stars in this business,
Mhm.
they're sending out, I'd say at least like 20,000 a month to get to some points where I want to get to. I mean, it just depends. Like I just end up 5,000 and like my estimated return on that is really high. Like it's a great mailer. This mailer go around. So if every mailer could be like this last one I sent, I would send out 5,000 every month and that would be
Yeah.
gold. But yeah, I think like ultimately, and especially as you start targeting like higher value properties, the name of the game is just like you got to send out more to find it. So I anticipate my growth to eventually be like 20,000 a month, if not more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've talked to some large land investors, and a lot of times, like where it ends up going, you keep going up this scaling ladder. And what I've seen is at the highest levels, they're sending out giant text blasts, so 40 or 50,000 people.
Mhm.
Then that data is refined down to a little bit smaller amount of data. They're cold calling the same area, but refined data. And
Yep.
then that data is narrowed down a little bit more. And then they're doing a mailing to that same area. So by the time they mailed, maybe they're down to 15,000 mailers. And so they're starting with a large funnel with the cheapest
Yep.
cost and then working their way down the funnel and doing multiple types of deals as well. So they're doing the flips to keep their team actively and their cash flow active, and then also doing maybe value add subdivides where the deal might take a year or two to get through, but it's a giant deal.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to see what the big teams are doing.
100%.
You head that direction.
Yeah. So I think, but I've heard a lot of people, and you probably talked to more than I have, who have started going away from texting. Have you seen that trend?
Mhm.
Just because of like the regulations and things around it? Because
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense to me, like that type of strategy.
Yeah, we do cold calling, and so we've seen a lot of people go away from texting and go directly to cold calling as the top of their funnel. And yeah, it's something where texting, a lot of regulations popped in, but it seems that the texting companies have gotten it figured out. They've got their workarounds in place now. It's just not as effective as it was because I think that you need people to opt in. You need to follow some specific guidelines with what you can put in your messages. So yeah, it's become less effective. It's interesting. So you were telling me about your business coach, which is a very interesting part of the process to me. How often do you meet with them? What do you talk about? Is it like a mindset coach or is this entrepreneur specific or land specific? Like how's that work?
Yeah, it's more a combination of entrepreneur slash mindset, I'd say.
Hmm.
I meet with him once a week, typically Monday mornings. And it's just been, I'd say the beginning of it was a lot more mindset than I expected,
Hmm.
of like figuring out what drives me, like when I'm experiencing like lower levels of energy, let's call it, like what's going on there, like how do I stay self motivated and keep good momentum, not let like bad momentum come in, or if it is, like how to like continue, like move quicker out of that. And I think talking to a lot of entrepreneurs in general, a lot of us feel like we're like constantly behind and trying to catch up. And um, so my coach has been really helpful, I think, developing like a lot of self awareness. Like I thought I was a
Hmm.
very aware person, but I've even learned just a lot about myself in this process. And then, so that was like, I think a lot of the beginning conversations we had. And then meanwhile, we do a lot of like strategy, tactics, OKRs, and tracking how we're doing and just making sure that I'm moving in the direction I want to be doing. And you can't really see it. There's like a whiteboard, like right here.
Okay.
So that's,
Yeah.
I have a big believer. One of my biggest influence, or like my biggest role model in the world, hands down, is a guy named Jesse Itzler, if you've heard of him.
I haven't. I'll write that down. How do you spell the last name?
IT, it's so ITZLER, I think.
Cool.
So his big message is like build your life resume. So this big calendar I have right behind me is
Hmm.
like one of his products. So he's a big believer of just planning out. If you want something to happen in your life, you got to plan it, you got to execute it. And so his whole thing is like life's more than just about work, I'd say. In like a nutshell, it's like his message. And so beyond just like work related, my coach, like he's helped me take a lot of like my personal development, type goals and really start moving towards those a lot more efficiently than I ever have before, I'd say. So like that whiteboard right there, like that is like a 5-year plan of like, here's different facets of my life, from like career to fitness to personal to relationship to family, that I want to accomplish like this year, next year, etc. So when we meet on Monday, or at the end of the month, we're always going over my OKRs. And my OKRs all line up to those goals ultimately. So it's been really helpful to have. I like structure, and I think you, as you probably know, like as an entrepreneur, it is hard to always have structure in your life. So it's been a really awesome way for me to be like, no, like I am moving in the right direction of like the life I want to be living. And being an entrepreneur and building a successful business and ultimately being wealthy is like part of that journey for me, but it's only part of the journey for me. Like I like really big into fitness. I got really into marathons. Like this year, my big fitness goals, I'm doing my first Ironman. So,
Oh, damn.
so like doing our half Ironman, so 70.3. So,
Okay.
but so it's like doing things like that, like when I was like in my 20s, like, oh, it'd be really cool to do. I'm about to turn 32. And it's like, so when I turned 30, it's like, I always knew I could run a marathon, but I never actually did it. So it was like, now I started putting these on the calendar, started executing on those. And so this last year was to do my first like ultra marathon, which was a 31-mile run. So it was like doing things like that, where it's like, those are like more life resume things, not necessarily like work resume things, or like things that are really also important to me and give me a lot of energy. So anyways, like that's like where my coach has really been extremely impactful on like my life, both like in work and like my business, but also in like outside of that. And he's a really successful guy himself. He has done a bunch of like Century 21 franchises and then retired from that and started doing coaching. I've known him for a really long time, and I started working with him about 6 months ago, and it's been already in that time frame. I've had a lot more clarity and a lot more structure and moving towards my goals, and just helps me be more consistent. Really, just like, oh, I want to be sending out 5,000 units a month. Last month I sent out 8, so he just keeps me accountable on my actions. And when I'm not doing it, he calls me on my shit.
Yeah, that's great. It's wild that how important the mindset is for entrepreneurs. It can be a lonely thing. It can be something where, like for me, where I'm always questioning, am I far enough? Am I hitting my goals? Like you just get so enveloped in like growing this giant thing, and it looks like you're never going to get there. So if you're not measuring like those little steps, I don't have any. So long story short, I gave myself small little metrics that I can measure. So just so I can
Yep.
tell myself, okay, dude, you're doing the right thing. You're moving at the right pace. You can relax. You can go to sleep.
Yeah.
Just chill out. There's a really cool tool that I used, or it's not even a tool, but similar to you have this 5 or 10-year plan, and then breaking that down into weekly or quarterly, monthly goals. I used Chat GTP. So I put it in, here's where I want to be in 5 years in all these different categories, break it down to yearly goals, then break it down to quarterly goals, then broke it down to monthly goals. So on a monthly basis, I can look at my goals and it's okay. Did you onboard 2 more clients this month? You onboarded 3. You're doing wonderful. Whereas maybe I onboarded 3 clients in a month and I'd be sitting there, God, I wish I was growing faster. But like it helps me being able to measure it and be like, just keep taking baby steps and stop putting so much pressure on yourself, and having that awareness is a powerful thing. So,
I totally
um,
agree. Yeah, it's been
yeah,
nice. Like you said, I think at the end of the day, I saw a video the other day of like this guy's like being successful, like 90% of the time, people who are successful, 90% of the time, they feel like they're behind in life.
yeah,
It's 8%, you feel like you're moving in the right direction, and there's 2% where you're like, all right, I'm making it, like I'm doing it. Like, but it was like it's such a small percentage of your time where it's hell yeah, like we're moving in the right direction. So what's been really like nice about like tracking, like you're talking about, I can look back and see my wins like week by week, month by month. I can see that I'm moving towards these goals. I can see it doesn't make me feel like I'm not behind, because I always feel that way. But it is a nice tool to be like, just to be like, okay, no, this is working. A big thing for me was like quitting my job. So it's even though I feel like I'm behind in life or where I want to be like wealth wise or whatever, it's like, no, dude, like you said 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you wanted to quit your job and like you did it.
Yeah.
Like now it's like, give yourself some time. You've already done most people can't do what you just did, whether
Mhm.
it's, mentally or just because they can't come up with an idea or whatever. It's just like, keep moving. Like it's all good.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's there's not a lot of people who, like you're saying, end up quitting their job, end up going out on their own, creating a business, and yeah, so it becomes it's such a mental game.
Yeah.
Impressive that you're running ultra marathons too. That's wild. I got my Garmin watch right here, so I'm on. I've got some of those goals set up as well. That's really cool. So what's the furthest you ran? You did that 31 mile. You
Yeah.
said?
That's the furthest I've ran. I've done some longer like hikes.
Okay.
But yeah, actually, like I walked some of that 31 miles, let's be honest. But yeah, so my longest I've ever gone was like 38 miles on like a 1 day hike. So the long distance I really enjoy. I'm trying to figure out if it's what I want to keep doing. Just got towards the end of this year, I started getting some injuries. So I'm starting to swim a lot more and bike a
Okay.
lot more. So that's why I was like, you know what? Let's train to do an Ironman. But this year we'll just do a half because open water swimming is a scary thing for me. So I
Mhm.
gotta figure that one out before I decide to go swim 2 miles in the water.
Yeah, that swim part that's like a daunting yeah, swimming 2 miles, that's no joke, especially open water.
It's not joke.
I guess you'd be in the ocean also, right?
Yeah, so the one I signed up for is in Wilmington, North Carolina. Yeah, so that one I think it's not in the ocean, but it's in like I forget what it's called, but it feeds into the ocean eventually.
Mhm. Yeah. If you can swim in the ocean, do a marathon or Ironman, then yeah, you'll be fine as a entrepreneur, I'm sure. Uh,
That's kind of what I feel like too. It's
yeah,
definitely the running's definitely been good mindset training.
yeah, the running for me is I'll sit at my computer and just get in the zone and grind all day, and then I'm done and my mind is like buzzing, and then I'll go on just a long run through the forest, and just it feels like it just turns the volume down. It's like everything just comes back to baseline a little bit, so it feels good.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your coaching because I know that you do. Is it land coaching specifically you do? Do you mix in some of the mindset things, or what's that look like for you?
Yeah, so most of the coaching is just based around land. Again, it's really just been organic. After my first year of land investing, I just made a Facebook post, like, hey, like this is what I've been doing, and I've made like an extra like $100,000. And then the next year, I made like a really similar post. So after year two of doing that, people reached out to me. I like never post on Facebook, so those were literally my last two posts were like those two posts. So then I had some people start reaching out to me, and then I was like, you know what? Like, what if I just built a little coaching program? There's so many out there. Like, I'll just build a little one that's going to help people just learn how to start the business. Very simple, very basic. Like, here's the business model. Here's the exact steps that I would take to start. So I started doing that. I had a few people sign up for it. And then after that, I did some more like one-on-one coaching. Like you got the course, but you also got like 3 months of us talking and helping really hold your hand through the process. Like when deals come in, I'm going to review them for you or with you. And so that's how it's just grown organically. And it's a little part of my business. It's fun to do. And I've been back and forth on like what I want to do with it now that I've had a dozen or so students plus go through it. And so is it something I'm going to commit my full time to grow that part of my business? I work on it like probably once a quarter to make it a little bit better, update it with new tactics and things like that. But my main part of my business is buying and selling lands. But I do really enjoy getting to see success. Like one of my students the other day, he just got his first couple deals and he's pretty pumped. So that was pretty cool to watch him go through that process and it's relatively affordable, I think, compared to a lot of other programs. But yeah, so that's what I do. I'd say it's really like simple. I'd say it's like I've done a lot of the land courses online. So it's based on a lot of what I've learned, obviously. It's 10 modules, really basic, give you a lot of the tools that I use and some structure. And then it's basically prepares you to send your first mailer and then how to close on deals and then how to sell those. So it's basically the business model, right, in a nutshell. It's not too dynamic as far as different strategies and But that's where I think the one-on-one part, like you get a little more of that flavor of, okay, like once you pick there you want to go to, now it's okay, here's how I think about it. And what are your thoughts and things like that. But it's been enjoyable. Like I said, I think I've had 15 or so students go through it, and yeah, 15, 16 actually. And then some of them stick with it, some of them don't.
Mhm, mhm.
It's all,
And
it's all my friends basically that have gone through it.
are you actively taking students? If someone sees this, would they reach out to you, and are you
Yeah.
accepting students currently?
So the student that I have now, he's actually one of my investors' friends.
Okay,
Uh,
interesting.
so he was like, "Hey, like I have a friend who's really interested in what you're doing." So when we first talked, I thought he wanted to be like an investor. He's like, "No, I want to do what you're doing." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome. I actually have a structure already in place." And he's awesome. He's actually probably my best student I've ever had.
Nice, nice.
It's like the most serious person I've ever met as far as it goes to
Mhm.
this. But yeah, so if someone wanted to reach out, like I'm happy to talk with anybody and happy to help them get started. And just to, I mean, investing has changed my life, no doubt. And it's such a low barrier to entry compared to a lot of other parts of real estate. And I think there's just so much possibility of whether you want it to be your full-time gig or you want to just make some extra money. Because part of my story I didn't really talk about was like one of the reasons I got into real estate in general was I just never really believed in. My first job was working in finance, and so I'm onboarding all these clients, and I just started realizing like, wow, all the people who are like really wealthy own their own business. And not that other people don't have wealth who worked full time and did a good job saving, whatever. But then I also started learning that, and you can Google this, but baby boomers, their number one fear is outliving their money. So I was like, no, this is the first generation really to have 401ks and IRAs, and their biggest fear is outliving their money. That plan doesn't make sense to me. Like, why would I do that? Meanwhile, I'm seeing all these people I'm bringing on who have so much money and they all own their own business. And my whole point of saying that was like, I got to figure out something that's going to help make me extra money. And that's one of the reasons that got me into real estate was like, okay, this brings cash flow. This can build wealth. It builds a skill, and I don't have to be so reliant on the stock market, which I have zero control in.
Mhm, mhm. I had a similar journey. I started as a real estate agent. I flipped houses and just did single family rentals, did that whole thing. And when I found land, it was like the pieces that I didn't like about real estate weren't there. It's just like, to me, it was just the fun part. It was like, oh, I don't have to worry about termites and or foundation inspections, or I just get to do the wheeling and dealing, and you do due diligence still, but
Of
there's
course.
just less there without the house there. There's less moving parts. And for me, it made it so much more fun. And yeah, similar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where can people find you? What's the best way to get in touch with you? If someone wants to just talk to you about land, someone wants to maybe become an investor for you, or someone wants to be a student. What's the best way to find you?
Yeah, I'd say the easiest way is probably now on X. I think my handle is the land guy. I think it's the underscore land underscore guy. And then you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Jamie Goldenberg. And then you Google the Land Investing Club. That'll take you to my like teachable page. And yeah, those are probably the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
All right. You're crushing it, Jamie. It was great to get to pick your brain and learn more about land from you. And I'm sure me and you will cross paths in the future here. So, all
That's it, man. I appreciate it.
right. See you later.
Bye.